You're running mission-critical systems that literally keep your business alive. Billing systems, manufacturing controls, customer databases. These applications have been the backbone of your operation for decades. But as Dave Sellers will explain, the cost of maintaining legacy systems can be staggering, often reaching into the hundreds of millions annually across an organization's application portfolio. Well, you've been kicking this can down the road because these systems are too important to risk touching. I get it. The workforce that knows how to maintain them, they're disappearing. And frankly, good luck finding a 25-year-old developer who wants to learn COBOL. But here's what's changed. Battle-tested code modernization tools now exist to transform these applications safely and automatically, often reducing costs by 70 to 90% while finally unlocking decades of trapped innovation. Well, today we're diving into Priority 4 from WWT's Cloud Priorities for 2025 Research Report, how organizations are moving beyond fear and taking action on automated application modernization. I'm joined by Dave Sellers, GM of Multi-Cloud, and Rachel Komeshak, Senior Solutions Principal. They've been helping customers navigate this transformation safely and profitably. I'm Robb Boyd. Welcome to WWT Presents Research.
WWT Presents Research.
Dave, I want to start with you. I'm going to go left to right. Dave, what is your title? What do you do for Worldwide Technology, especially as it relates to today's application modernization topic?
Yeah, so nice to see you, Rob. My title is GM of Multi-Cloud, and that really covers the swath of everything our clients are doing in the cloud, whether it's data lakes and analytics, whether it's security related, networking related, whether it's application development. And to today's topic, I've seen a lot of migrations of applications. I haven't seen a lot of legacy modernization, which is what we're here to talk about. And I think with all the advances in AI and the coding assistive tools, I think now is the time to talk about that and execute on it.
Yeah. Why, can I just ask you real quick? Can you give me a short, why is now the time? Why would you say?
Well, I think, historically we've just kicked the can. They're mission critical. We don't want to touch them. We don't have a workforce that's really wanting to work on them any longer. So we just don't touch, don't talk about. But that also stifles innovation, and that also stifles your ability to compete. And that also stifles your ability to give your users a better system experience, better response times, better reporting, better everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Now we've partnered with a third party who's been doing these automated application modernizations, which we'll get into. And so if I could take a code base that's 20 years old and in 3 months modernize it to something that's in the cloud and a native architecture using today's tools and services, and then get today's benefit of having all the coding assistant tools, the AI engines, all these things that are now popping their heads up and proving to be very, very beneficial, now is the time we can really talk about this.
Well, and of course, that's exactly what excited me about this particular topic, because I've never addressed this. And I know, well, it's been talked about, and we went deep into containerization and all the complexity and hair around doing these things historically. So I understand why people would be afraid to touch it. It's the old, if it ain't broke, well, it is broke. It may be functioning in many ways, but in terms of your ability to move forward, yeah, we're going to talk about how and why that should happen. Rachel, thank you for waiting so patiently. You have a new title, actually. What is your new title? What does that mean for us in this discussion? And what are your thoughts getting started here?
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having us on today. I am now the Senior Solutions Principal for our digital group. And so what that means is I work with my colleagues like Dave to make sure, as we're figuring out the various pieces that we're modernizing, that Worldwide can cover off on all of that. So I'm working with colleagues from security. I'm working with colleagues from application development. We have, top tier QAs and QEs that we can bring in. And so I'm kind of helping to put together that Voltron team, if you will, where WWT can really plug in and help businesses where maybe things have been stagnating, as Dave mentioned, and kind of take those forward.
I hope this is fair. And feel free, if you don't have the specific numbers right in front of either of you, I'm just kind of curious, what would you estimate is the cost of these kind of things? Like, what is the general cost to any given business, maybe of a certain size, or just in the industry in general? What do we know about how this really needs to move from a cost perspective?
Yeah, I was just say, I think, the customers that I've been talking to the last year or two, Rob, their legacy footprint for most of our clients, not all, there are absolute exceptions that have moved forward before now. But if you just use easy numbers like $10 million for a legacy mainframe footprint, and that's all up. That's people, that's the equipment, that's the support fees, that's the licensing of the tools and the software running on it, all those things. And you say it's $10 million, right? And then let's say you had 12 legacy systems in your footprint, in your manufacturing company, or your healthcare company. So you're talking about a significant amount of cost to that IT structure every year, and it's only going up. So if you use the 10 times 12, you're at $120 million of IT spend for something that's, let's just say, 25 years old and not advancing, not improving.
Yeah.
Versus what we're here to talk about today is how do I take a couple $1 million and modernize that thing into that modern architecture stack and take advantage of all the things we mentioned, and do that then and reduce that cost by, I'm seeing in certain situations, 70 to 90%. So that $10 million system may drop down to $1.5 million. So $1.5 million, you're now talking $12, $15 million instead of the $100 million. And I don't know any CIO or CFO that wouldn't like that reduction, much less than the advancement of the system.
And
Rachel?
Dave, you're not even hitting on the cost of the risk that is there as these applications get harder and harder to maintain. I think if I were in that position, that's what would be keeping me up at night. Is we have developers who are maybe aging out of the workforce, are no longer available to support these sorts of things. There are ins and outs that are in their head. And I think, as we see these next generations of leaders come in, they really understand that is a risk to their business on top of the opportunity cost that is lost by just not modernizing your systems and not, having the latest, greatest experience, whether it's for your employees or your customers.
I think you make an exceptional point from the standpoint that most of these legacy systems are mission critical systems, right? They're
usually the most important ones. That's how they got developed. They're probably custom developed back in the day, right?
Exactly.
As monolithic.
And so they go down, they go out, you can't find a part, you can't find a person to work on them. Something's not going to be good.
It's so funny. My reference, I was in the hotel business in another life much earlier. So it was like 30 years ago. But I remember working at a high-end property, but the whole back-end system was run by an IBM AS400. And at that point in time, it was already a challenge to find people. And it was really funny, all the laborious tasks that staff would do, no one knew what they were doing. They just knew to follow this piece of paper and do certain things, insert this weird floppy thing here. It's going to make a lot of noise and run for 2 hours. And then, the night auditor is doing their different stuff. But it's funny that this is still going on. Just to make sure that I'm understanding kind of the picture of this, is it correct to assume that we're talking about companies that probably have some applications that can participate in a modern cloud infrastructure and do some of the things that they're wanting to do? So they've got a taste of it, but then I think it's fully understandable why you might not want to touch what you consider the complex jewels of the thing. And you just kind of say, how long can we just kind of make it last and maybe not have to answer it? Because maybe we thought there wasn't good answers. And I think what your guys saying here is, hey, there's better answers today than there have been. Is that reasonable?
Absolutely. I think, just the changes that we've seen in, say, the last 6 months in the strength of these AI tools, the way that, it's able to not only accelerate, but also de-risk with, unit testing and other things. It now is the time to strike while the iron is hot. There is such an opportunity right now to make those moves, as Dave was talking about earlier, that save your organization money, but de-risk it in the right way. So if that's what has been holding you back previously, it really feels like we're at an inflection point right now where you can make those moves and have much more confidence in them.
Yeah. And you, Dave, you were talking about why now is the time. And we kind of went back and forth. I'm looking through my notes here to make sure I get these in front of me here. There was kind of a structure that I wanted to try and use to kind of talk through phases, for lack of a better term, of how someone can kind of go through and make a pragmatic attempt at not attempt, that sounds like we're trying, but actually, make this kind of positive change in a way that benefits their business, but also is in a way that makes it approachable, I guess. And out of those five, just so we can put them on screen: discovery and assessment, and then the modernization engine. I'll ask you about that more. Testing and validation is third, and then fourth, deployment and enhancement, and then finally, business transformation. So Dave, starting with discovery and assessment, what's important in this area? I mean, it's a matter of knowing what you have, but are there important angles to understand with them?
That's the beauty of this offering that we've put together is we've got the partner who has the intellectual property that's been doing this automated application refactoring modernization for many, many years, many, many projects, proven. And then we've got our WWT digital team that can do feature function enhancement. They can do application discovery. They can go look at your environment and see which ones are best candidate, hardest candidate. Maybe there's some reasons to do one versus the other now. We can then turn the team over at Worldwide to do new UIs, right? A lot of these systems are still working off a 1985 green screen user experience. And, who wants to work on those anymore? So there's just a lot of things that go into that discovery and analysis as to what the customer has, what the customer wants it to do, and then where do they have resource and expertise we need to partner with versus what do they want to offload to either the IP or WWT employees.
Dave, I think that's a really important point. We may get in there and say, sure, we can modernize this, we can move it over, or we can start over. I think that's one of the other things that makes Worldwide unique is we're not going to waste your time on something like that. So if we see an opportunity to say, hey, we can build this better, faster, stronger for you, net native, hey, let's move this other stuff over, let's deal with that later, but let us also in parallel focus in and recreate something for you, that's modern and accessible in that same environment.
Step two or phase two of this the modernization engine. And I wonder if you can have you guys explain this. I'm curious what happens to the code. Some of that may be considered intellectual property. What's important to consider here?
I think it's magic. So Dave, do you want to take a stab at this?
I'll accept magic.
Yeah, magic it is. The company we partnered with, this is all they do. They've been doing it for more than 25 years. They've over hundreds of these modernization projects. And they guarantee a 99.9% code modernization success with a year warranty attached to it that they'll come back if something is missed. So that's their degree of confidence. And so when I talk to customers, I immediately get well, I don't want to end up with Jobol, right? Some Java, some COBOL, because now you've made it worse instead of better. And I can assure you that that's not the case with this intellectual property. It will truly modernize it. You get to pick the target database. You get to pick the target tools and services you're using. And again, then Worldwide complements that with, well, what if you don't like part of that solution, or that's not the right answer for you? We have a team of people that'll make it the way you need it to be.
And part of that assurance process, I guess, as you're going through it, bringing in phase three around testing and validation. So anyone involved in code development understands the importance of testing your code and really testing constantly at a degree, something we can't do with monolithic applications historically. Where is this phase's importance in terms of, one, making sure you're moving in the right direction? Part of me is wondering, because is this developed in parallel so you could always fall back to your monolith until because you're not running on this code yet, right? You're developing the code, and this is a testing and validation. Can you explain what's important to happen there?
I know it's going to sound hyperbolic, but I think we've got some of the best in class quality engineers. We've got people who understand UI and UX. So they're going in, they're comparing to the old system. What is something that could have been missed? What is something that maybe got lost in translation? Making sure that we fully understand that start to end process of whatever this application is doing, and working with your stakeholders to make sure that we understand that. That's one of the things about Worldwide is we never work in a silo. We always want to be transparent. We always want to get that input and understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve.
The average conversion or modernization, better word, of the actual legacy code base is typically between 90 and 120 days. So the magic is done in 3 or 4 months. Where the rubber meets the road, to Rachel's point, is if we can get in there at day one with her team and go side by side with that process, meet with the client, and then understand, do they have test cases they're using today that we can leverage? Do we need to start from scratch? That's going to determine whether this then becomes a 5-month project and we're done, a 7-month project, or a 10-month project. But we rarely see these going past 9 to 12 months.
But it's that scoping at the beginning, I think, that really helps you control your ability to call something a success. And I assume it follows some of the principles I've seen you guys constantly with a lot of the different services you offer, which is where a lot of times, once you understand the outcomes that need to be achieved for a specific focus area, you guys tend to look at, let's get a quick win, if that's, agreed upon with the client, to say, let's understand the process by going through something that has maybe a little bit less risk, maybe has a little bit easier, less people to have to deal with to pull it off, so that we can say, okay, now we understand what it is through all 5 phases. And now we're ready for the bigger, more hairy ones because we're a little bit more comfortable with, this stuff is real. Okay.
Yeah, Rob, we love a playbook on something like that, right? Like, let's go in, let's understand the environments, let's understand where it's pulling data from some of these back-end systems, and not just fly blind on some of this.
Yeah. So going on to phase 4, we talk about deployment and then enhancement, because the whole idea is not simply to replicate, I guess, exactly what you were doing before. I'm curious, in this phase, is there a degree of, the initial deployment is it usually going to be targeted probably at exactly what was done before, with the idea now that you're on a better foundation for enhancements, so that maybe there's not a heavy change from the users at this point, right? Because it's a back end support that's something that may appear somewhat the same, perhaps faster. Am I generalizing through this? Okay.
Yeah, that MVP is going to look like parity, right? Let's get it modernized, and then let's make it, the next phase and the next phase, where now we have the opportunity where we can really go in and enhance, or those things that have been tickling your brain for years that you said, I really wish it would do X, Y, and Z. Now you're in a position to do those things a lot easier than you were in a legacy system.
And I think the other salient point to that theme, Rob, Worldwide has the networking experts. We've got the cloud engineering experts. We've got the security team, right? So when this mission critical system is going to move from a data center on-prem to a public cloud environment, in most cases, all those other boxes have to be checked and double checked to make it work and make it secure and make it safe and efficient and scalable and all those wonderful things that people expect from cloud. And so we've got that team of people that can partner with Rachel's group to do that.
Yeah, I've met a lot of those people, and you do have a lot of smart people. And I always like that, because you're like, here's a deep bench of these different eggheads, people that really understand their domain in an uncomfortably detailed manner. And you're like, I get to work with them when I have a problem with, Google Cloud specifically versus AWS, because they're handling things, of course, completely differently. No problem. You guys have experts that are deep in the weeds on each of those platforms, as one example. It makes me, I tend to wonder, when you're talking about things you couldn't do before and enhancements, I would think that integration has got to be huge on that, because of the fact that the first frustration that for me has always come up in most client situations has been, wow, this is such a monolithic, enclosed, precious type of thing. It, of course, doesn't have APIs. That didn't exist when this thing was developed. But even any other way to easily integrate without building a whole parallel infrastructure, that's a slow, problem-prone interface of some sort.
And it might even be interfaces that exist in your ERP system or something else that you're able to now tap into, that in a legacy infrastructure, you just weren't even able to take advantage of them.
Yeah.
Or
so you can
other
rethink
cost
workflows
savings
and stuff now too.
Or other cost savings may be, I need data out of this old horse and I need to make decisions on a real-time basis, but it can't do that. So now I've got a whole another data lake environment set up where I extract the data out of these legacy systems, put them together in some form of a data lake, and then I can do modern analytics. Well, that's another cost that's coming from the fact that this is a 30-year-old architecture.
The final phase is business transformation, and we're talking about that continually. So I don't think there's a fresh question to pull out of you now, but I want to make sure that we've hit all 5. But here's what I want to ask about is, and this goes back a little bit to the earlier question about why is now the time. And I was having a discussion with some other of your team members yesterday. Some people are conflating automation and AI. And I noticed specifically when talking with you guys, you definitely understand the differences. But I wonder, is AI driving some of the automation capabilities for this modernization? Has that become both a driver to help you pull it off, perhaps, but also a reason for the fact that you need your entire infrastructure playing in this game if you're going to continue to be competitive.
These systems are typically homegrown, for purpose, built the way I wanted it, all up. And so AI is really powerful when it can look at a large set of similar data, right? Or at least a set of data that's consistent. And I just churn through it and I learn stuff, and now I'm doing things that I could never do before. I don't think we can use AI itself right this minute, today, sitting here, to do the same thing that this partner's IP is doing, because they've learned all the hard knocks the last 20 years of how these things work. And so they've got business rules and logic and decisions trees built in their IP, where I think the AI is powerful is when it's modernized and now, hey, run this test while I go to lunch, or tell me 3 code recommendations while I sleep tonight, or can you run through the documentation and find anything that seems to be out of, like, all of those AI use cases just took app dev from, 2022 to 2030. Like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and I like that in the sense that we're not throwing, public frontier models at this. But specifically, and especially in the priority report too, is the notion of AI code generators. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
And this is really what's enabled us to both analyze the existing code and say what's a parallel representation within modern languages. Is that what's happening? Rachel, you're nodding your head.
We need to think about AI in terms of an accelerator, not an automator. So I think that's the differentiation of where we're at right now. To Dave's point, it can help you do these things faster. It can help you make decisions faster. But we're not at the point where we're just going to set it and forget it and walk away, and our AI overlords have taken care of everything. We're still using it as that that accelerator on all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Be wary of the vendors that do promise that you can set and forget. What is the best way to approach you guys? Because I feel like this is one of these rare things where there needs to be more awareness that you guys can do this and you can do it successfully. But I feel like most customers that you're looking for probably do know that this exists. They're just not used to putting it in the front of the brain and saying it's time to dedicate, some more people and energy towards maybe resolving this and not kicking the can down the road, as you say, Dave. Yeah. So what is the best way to approach you guys, and how do you typically see that happen?
If I was in a customer's shoes, Rob, I think I would come to Worldwide and kind of test the envelope. I would say, okay, I'd like to see a cost analysis of just high level, here's what it's costing me today to run my footprint. I'd like an analysis of what it might cost. I know we can't be 100% accurate, but we can get in the ballpark to where it makes some sense to look at pro and con. And then another beauty of this IP is it's got what it's called a blueprint model. So you can take the actual legacy code, and we will do this at no cost to the customer.
Okay.
You can run it through this engine, and it will show you the architecture that it's going to create. And so that's kind of a, de-risking this process down considerably, such that now you know, hey, it makes sense financially. I'm going to improve my business operations. I'm going to improve the experience for my users. I'm going to improve my ability to accelerate this through AI, to Rachel's point, and I can see what it's going to look like for free. That's the way I would approach it.
That's really a dip your toe in the water. Let's just take a quick look. Does that require an on-site visit, or for them to pull special files or give you access to something?
It's either sharing the code, which not the data, right? We don't want any data, just sharing the code base itself to us, and we run it, come back. Or worst case, we can, quote, install something on the customer's prem. That obviously goes through several steps of security and permissions, but certainly can do it either way.
Well, as we wrap things up here, I just got one just kind of catch-all question I always like to ask. What do you wish more leaders understood about modernization?
I think that the opportunity is just there right now to take your business a step forward. I think this is something that has been a big risk to businesses for a lot of years. And now we can de-risk it. Now we can do this faster in a way that makes it so approachable. So I think it's just time to think about it again. I think this was one of those things that was easy to say, let's kick to the next fiscal year. And so, my challenge would be make it a 2026 goal. Now is the time to do it.
It's a lot of money to maintain the status quo. And I don't know any business leader that thinks they can compete the next 5 years by remaining as is.
Well, the conversation that Dave and Rachel shared today makes one thing crystal clear. The economics have fundamentally shifted. Maintaining legacy systems isn't just expensive, it's become the bigger risk. Every year you delay, the problem gets more expensive and the available expertise becomes more scarce. But as we've learned, the tools exist today to change this equation. Battle-tested modernization technology that's been refined over 25 years. AI-assisted development that accelerates everything once you're modernized. And specialists who are confident enough to offer year-long warranties on their work. Well, Dave put it perfectly. No business leader thinks they can compete for the next 5 years by remaining as is. So the question isn't whether you should modernize these mission-critical applications. The question is whether you'll do it proactively while you still have choices, or if you wait until you have, no other option. So if you're ready to stop spending millions annually on museum pieces and start unlocking the innovation that's been trapped in 30-year-old code, download WWT's full Cloud Priorities for 2025 report to see how modernization fits into your broader cloud strategy. And remember, as Rachel said earlier, make this a 2026 goal, because now is the time. I'm Robb Boyd. Thanks for watching WWT Presents Research.
This episode is supported by Vast Data. Vast delivers a unified data platform purpose-built for AI and advanced analytics, eliminating silos, accelerating insights, and scaling to meet the demands of modern enterprise workloads.